Chapter 1. The Empty Plate. The onion surrendered beneath Sofia Martinez's blade, each slice executed with mathematical precision. Tap, tap, tap. The knife's rhythm echoed through her silent apartment kitchen, a metronome counting the hours until dawn. 3:16 in the morning, and sleep remained an elusive fantasy. Tap, tap, tap. Each perfect cube measured exactly 3 millimeters on all sides. Not that anyone would notice. Not that anyone would care. The onion wasn't even destined for a dish, just another victim of her midnight compulsion. The first hint of Barcelona's morning light crept through her kitchen window, painting the copper pots hanging above her stove in soft amber hues. Those pots, the only survivors from Innovation's kitchen she'd managed to salvage, needed polishing. Everything in her life needed polishing lately.
Perfect mise en place begins with perfect cuts,
She muttered, echoing her first chef's mantra as she aligned another onion on the cutting board.
and perfect cuts begin with
Her phone buzzed, vibrating against the counter like an angry wasp. Another dating app notification. Some stranger with carefully curated photos and empty promises. Sofia swiped it away without looking, her finger catching on a small burn mark from yesterday's catering gig. The kind of work she'd once delegated to first-year apprentices. Her gaze drifted to the frame hanging on her kitchen wall. Not a photo of family or friends, but a framed review. Sofia Martinez isn't just cooking food. She's writing love letters to Spanish cuisine with molecular gastronomy as her ink. The flowery prose had made her cringe even at the height of her success. Now it served only to measure how far she'd fallen. The stack of bills on her counter cast long shadows in the dawn light, topped by the acceptance letter from the Barcelona International Culinary Institute that she'd read so many times, the paper had gone soft at the creases. The word student still caught in her throat like a fishbone. Tap, tap, tap. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Elena, her former sous chef, sending photos from the opening of her own new restaurant in Valencia. Sofia's fingers hovered over the screen, composing and deleting 3 different congratulatory responses before setting the phone face down.
Perfección sin pasión es solo precisión.
Her abuela used to say, watching young Sofia measure ingredients to the milligram. Perfection without passion is merely precision. The morning light strengthened, illuminating the mathematically perfect orange diamonds on her cutting board. Sofia stared at them, arranged with architectural exactitude, and felt nothing. No spark of creativity, no urge to combine them with the unexpected, no desire to transform them into something that would make a diner's eyes widen with delight. She'd lost her restaurant to Ricardo's betrayal, but somehow this felt worse. Losing the fire that had driven her into the kitchen in the first place. The emptiness in her chest had its own gravitational pull, dense enough to swallow whatever passion might try to escape. Tap, tap, tap. Her fingers traced the creases of the acceptance letter once more. 6 months of being a student instead of Chef Martinez. 6 months of starting over. 6 months of admitting to the world that Sofia Martinez needed help remembering how to cook. The thought should have humiliated her. Perhaps it would have, if she could feel anything beyond the hollow echo where her ambition used to live. She slid the perfect cubes of onion into the compost bin, a funeral for ingredients that would never realize their potential, and picked up another carrot. The blade aligned with practiced precision as Barcelona's sunrise painted her sterile kitchen in warm golds and oranges that she couldn't taste anymore. Tap, tap, tap. Tomorrow she'd start at the Institute. Tomorrow everything would change. Tap, tap, tap. It had to. Chapter 2. Hollow Hunger. The industrial kitchen of Catering Barcelona reeked of bleach and mediocrity. Sofia aligned 200 identical phyllo cups with military precision, each exactly 17 millimeters apart on the stainless steel prep table. The goat cheese mixture in her piping bag had been the company's signature appetizer since before the Berlin Wall fell, a culinary fossil preserved in corporate amber. Pipe, garnish, plate, repeat.
More dill in the filling.
Jorge called out as he passed, clipboard clutched to his chest like a shield.
The client specifically requested.
More dill, yes.
Sofia bit back a response about how the sharp herb would obliterate the delicate cheese notes, creating an unbalanced palate experience that would linger unpleasantly. Nobody here wanted her opinion on flavor profiles. They wanted predictable food for predictable people at predictable parties. The morning crawled by in assembly line monotony. Her hands moved with mechanical efficiency, while her mind drifted to another kitchen, another time. 3 days she'd spent perfecting a saffron foam that captured the essence of Mediterranean sunshine, experimenting with citrus oils, local herbs, the exact temperature that would coax the precious crimson filaments to surrender their soul. That golden cloud, floating above perfectly seared scallops like captured sunlight. Now she garnished baby quiche with parsley sprigs. Pipe, a perfect rosette of bland cheese. Garnish, 3 leaves, placed with watchmaker precision. Plate, align each finished piece precisely alongside its identical siblings. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their sterile glare flattening every surface into the same lifeless gray. A delivery driver's radio drifted in from the loading dock. Some pop song about freedom and dancing that felt like deliberate mockery.
200 down, 300 to go.
Jorge announced, dropping another box of phyllo shells beside her station.
The Jensen wedding increased their guest count.
Sofia's piping bag paused mid-squeeze.
I thought this was for the Miller retirement party.
Oh no, that's after. You'll need to do those too.
He checked his clipboard.
Another 200 of the same, but they want...
Extra dill.
She finished for him, the words tasteless in her mouth. Her hands reeked of dill and surrender. The clock on the wall read 12:45, and her private lesson with Isabella Ramirez started at 2. Just enough time to finish these, prep the Miller batch, and take the quickest shower of her life to scrub away the stench of industrial kitchen and crushed dreams. Jorge must have noticed her glance at the clock.
The Millers can wait until tomorrow, but I need the Jensen order done before you leave.
Sofia nodded, reaching for another piping bag. Pipe, garnish, plate. The motions so familiar she could probably do them in her sleep. Maybe she was doing them in her sleep. Maybe this was all just a nightmare, and she'd wake up back in her own kitchen at Innovation, where creativity still meant something beyond how artfully you could place a sprig of parsley. The Ramirez penthouse elevator required a security code. Sofia punched in the numbers Isabella had texted her, feeling the ghost of Chef Martinez, the innovator who had earned a Michelin star before 30, drift further and further away with each floor the elevator climbed. Isabella Ramirez, age 24 and heir to the Ramirez construction fortune, greeted her in red-soled heels that probably cost more than Sofia's monthly rent, and a silk blouse that definitely did.
I thought we could do something Instagram-worthy today.
Isabella was already positioning her phone on an elaborate tripod setup.
Maybe those cloud eggs everyone's posting? Or that butterboard thing?
We discussed learning proper knife skills.
But I'll never need to actually cut things myself.
Isabella pouted, perfectly glossed lips curving downward in practiced disappointment.
I just want to learn the pretty stuff for my content creation.
For the next hour, Sofia watched her student massacre perfectly good ingredients in pursuit of likes and followers. Isabella managed to both overwhip and underseason the eggs, all while recording herself with practiced angles and pouts that would have made a silent film star proud.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Isabella beamed at her phone screen, showing Sofia a filtered image of what looked like scrambled eggs had mated with a cirrus cloud. It already had 57 likes.
Fascinating.
Sofia said, her smile as stiff as week-old bread. Her phone buzzed as she escaped the Ramirez building. Another dating app match, this one with a profile picture that showed off impressive arms and a charming smile. His opening message was surprisingly clever, making a joke about molecular gastronomy that showed he'd at least Googled her. Why not? She thought, fingers tapping a response. Better than another night alone with her knife skills practice. 3 hours later, she pressed a handsome lawyer named Adrian against the wall of her bedroom, his kisses technically proficient but oddly reminiscent of her morning's piping work. Mechanical, repetitive, reliable. His body was as promised in his photos, all clean lines and deliberate movements. He knew what he was doing. She knew what she was doing. It was like executing a well-practiced recipe, each step performed with skill, but without soul.
That was...
Adrian breathed afterward, pulling her against his too warm chest. Sofia responded, a meaningless sound that could be interpreted however he needed. They exchanged polite compliments and contact information they both knew they'd never use. She showed him out, then stood in her shower with the water hot enough to sting, trying to wash away the hollow feeling that seemed to follow her everywhere lately. She thought about Adrian's perfect technique, Isabella's Instagram eggs, the endless rows of identical phyllo cups. Everything in her life felt like a pale imitation of what it should be, carefully constructed but lacking any real flavor. Sleep eluded her again. At 3 a.m., she found herself back in the kitchen, pulling out her knife roll. The familiar weight of her chef's knife settled into her palm as she reached for an onion, its papery skin crinkling beneath her fingers. Tap, tap, tap. Tomorrow she'd start at the Institute. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tap, tap, tap. It had to. Chapter 3. Bad Blood. The Barcelona International Culinary Institute loomed before Sofia, its modernist facade refracting morning sunlight into prismatic daggers. She adjusted her knife roll, the same one she'd carried for 15 years, the leather worn to a buttery softness that matched the contours of her palm perfectly. The registration forms in her other hand felt like surrender papers, the Institute's embossed letterhead mocking her with every slight movement.
You must be lost.
The voice behind her sliced through the morning air, crisp as freshly starched chef whites.
Student registration is through the side entrance. Service staff aren't permitted at the main doors until after 9.
Sofia turned, a correction forming on her lips, and felt her stomach drop as if she'd missed a step on a darkened staircase. She knew that face. Had memorized it, in fact, after spending countless nights staring at his restaurant review, the one that had triggered innovation's downfall. Those patrician features had haunted her professional nightmares for 2 years. Marcus Blackwood, the traditionalist terror of European cuisine. His eyes narrowed with recognition, slate-gray irises cooling several degrees.
Sofia Martinez.
Sofia lifted her chin exactly 23 degrees, the precise angle of professional defiance.
Here for my remedial lessons, Chef Blackwood. Since apparently my destructive modernist approach and blatant disregard for culinary heritage needed correction. Your words, if I recall correctly?
Yes.
His mouth curved into something too sharp to be a smile, too precise to be accidental.
The woman who turned Jamin Iberico into an aerosol. Tell me, does everything sacred need to be deconstructed into oblivion?
Only culinary techniques that have fallen into comfortable slumber.
She met his gaze with the steady calm she'd once used to stare down health inspectors.
Some traditions require awakening, don't you think? Or is Spanish cuisine meant to be preserved like a museum exhibit, looked at but never touched?
He was taller than she'd expected, with shoulders that filled out his chef's jacket with an authority that his review photo hadn't captured. Salt and pepper hair swept back from temples that had only seen distinguished hints of gray 3 years ago. The silver had advanced like frost claiming a garden.
Some things.
He said softly, his accent clipping each consonant with surgical precision.
are perfect exactly as they are. The height of arrogance is believing one can improve upon centuries of culinary evolution.
The height of arrogance
Sofia countered.
is believing evolution has a finish line.
A laugh interrupted their standoff.
Oh good, you two have met.
A woman with close-cropped silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes approached.
I'm Mei Chen, pastry department head, and apparently now referee. I wasn't scheduled for contact sports until after lunch.
Marcus's jaw tightened enough that Sofia could almost hear enamel grinding against enamel.
Ms. Martinez was just heading to student registration.
Chef Martinez.
Sofia corrected automatically, then winced at the telling slip. Not anymore. Not since Ricardo had...
Actually,
May consulted her tablet, tapping the screen with a decisive finger.
Sofia's in my first block. Come on. I'll show you to the locker room while Chef Grumpy here practices his scowl for class. He does facial exercises every morning. Very precise regimen.
Sofia followed May, feeling Marcus's gaze burning between her shoulder blades like a misaligned salamander. The ghost of another man's betrayal rose unbidden, Ricardo's face the day he'd announced his restructuring of their restaurant partnership. Their restaurant. The one they'd planned to run together as husband and wife, before she caught him with their hostess bent over the prep table after closing.
Don't let Marcus intimidate you.
May said as they entered the locker room.
He's brilliant but bitter. Something about a restaurant partnership gone wrong.
Sofia's laugh held no humor.
Seems to be going around like a bad case of food poisoning.
Here,
May pointed to an empty locker.
you can store your things. Oh, have you met your station partner yet? Ah, perfect timing, Zara.
A young woman with purple-streaked black hair bounded over, practically vibrating with energy. If she'd been a dish, she'd be something with too many competing ingredients and excessive garnish.
Hi, I'm Zara Patel, former software engineer, current culinary disaster area.
She extended a hand with short, practical nails painted an improbable shade of green.
Fair warning, I've never worked in a professional kitchen, but I make up for it with enthusiasm and a willingness to buy drinks after my inevitable failures. My mise en place looks like a crime scene, but I'm very trainable.
Despite herself, Sofia felt her lips twitch toward something that might, under different circumstances, have become a smile.
Former Michelin-starred chef, current student.
The word still stuck in her throat like undercooked pasta.
No way!
Zara's eyes widened.
Wait, innovation? The molecular gastronomy temple in Madrid? I tried to get reservations there for months. What happened to...
She broke off at May's subtle head shake.
Long story.
Sofia said quietly.
Involving a bad review, a worse fiancé, and an unfortunately timed health department inspection that I'm still convinced was orchestrated by someone with a vested interest in my failure.
Sounds like you need those drinks now rather than later.
Zara declared, undeterred.
There's a great little place around the corner. Very anti-molecular gastronomy critic free.
A genuine smile tugged at Sofia's mouth.
Maybe after class.
Which starts in 5 minutes.
May announced.
Come on, you two. Let's see what you know about lamination before Marcus has a chance to explain why everyone's technique is an abomination against French culinary traditions.
The pastry kitchen was Sofia's old nemesis. Precise measurements and exact temperatures. The domain of scales and thermometers rather than intuition and innovation. She watched May demonstrate the proper technique for croissant dough, the way the butter needed to remain cold but pliable, the exact angle of each fold.
The key,
May explained, her hands moving with practiced grace,
is respecting the ingredients enough to listen to what they want to do naturally. Butter wants to create layers. Gluten wants to develop structure. Our job is to guide that process, not force it.
Sofia felt her shoulders tense. It sounded too much like Marcus's philosophy, this reverence for tradition, for letting things be what they've always been. Beside her, Zara was frantically taking notes on her phone, muttering something about butter temperatures and fold ratios. But as the morning progressed, Sofia found herself drawn into the methodical rhythm of lamination. There was something meditative about the precise folds, the careful rolling, the way the dough transformed under her hands. Her first batch came out nearly perfect, muscle memory from her early training asserting itself before modernist techniques had captured her imagination.
Not bad for a molecular gastronomist,
May teased, breaking one open to examine the layers.
though I bet you're itching to turn it into croissant foam.
Please.
Sofia sniffed, allowing professional disdain to color her voice.
Croissant air with caramelized butter spheres and powdered jam, obviously. The foam approach would be derivative.
Zara's croissants, by contrast, looked like they'd been run over by a particularly vengeful bread truck.
I think I forgot to keep count of my folds.
She admitted, poking one sadly.
Also, possibly what counting is. Is 15 a number? I may have done 15 folds or 3. It's all a buttery blur.
After class, as they were cleaning their stations, May approached Sofia with an apologetic smile.
Fair warning, you've got Marcus next. Classical French technique.
Sofia's hand stilled on her bench scraper.
Of course I do.
Don't worry.
Zara said, somehow having gotten flour in her purple hair.
I heard he only made 3 students cry yesterday, out of like 20. Those are pretty good odds. That's what, 15%? See, I can math. Sometimes.
Fantastic.
Sofia muttered, beginning to meticulously wipe down her work surface, each stroke precisely parallel to the last. Through the window, she could see Marcus in the courtyard, correcting a student's knife grip with the kind of precise attention to detail she'd once admired in his review, before he'd turned that exacting eye on her own restaurant. His head lifted, as if sensing her scrutiny. Their eyes met through the glass. Sofia shut her toolbox with more force than necessary. She hadn't come here for redemption or revenge, but she hadn't come to back down either. Chapter 4. Heat in the Kitchen. Sofia's knife sliced through the shallot with micrometer precision, each cut exactly 2 millimeters apart. The blade whispered against the cutting board in a rhythm as steady as a metronome. She could feel Marcus hovering behind her, his presence radiating heat like a brick oven set too high. The entire class seemed to hold its collective breath, 24 pairs of lungs suspended in anticipation of his critique.
Your technique is...
He paused, the silence stretching like poorly tempered chocolate.
acceptable.
High praise.
Sofia kept her eyes on her work, a smile threatening to crack her professional facade.
Should I frame that review, Chef Blackwood, or will you be publishing it in Le Monde first?
A few students choked back laughs. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she caught a hint of his cologne beneath the kitchen's aromatics. Something classic with bergamot and sandalwood. Of course, the man probably bathed in Earl Grey tea.
Perhaps.
His voice dropped to a register meant only for her ears, the consonants crisper than fresh-baked tuiles.
You could transform my approval into an essence and atomize it over your deconstructed humble pie. I believe molecular gastronomy excels at style over substance.
Sofia's knife stilled for just a fraction of a second. She refused to acknowledge how his proximity sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine, like the first sip of an unexpectedly complex wine.
Molecular gastronomy is about innovation through understanding, chef. There's nothing innovative about humble pie. Though I'm sure you have a perfectly adequate recipe from 1847, perhaps handed down on parchment by Escoffier himself?
He leaned in, ostensibly examining her knife work, the heat of him briefly eclipsing the kitchen's ambient temperature.
Your brunoise is 0.3 millimeters asymmetrical on the left side.
His breath ghosted past her ear, carrying the faint scent of mint. It wasn't, and they both knew it.
Second row, third cube from the end.
She replied with honeyed sweetness.
Would you like me to get you a magnifying glass? Or perhaps your reading glasses? The strain of preserving culinary antiquities must be dreadful on the eyesight.
His soft chuckle surprised her, deep, genuine, and entirely too appealing, like the unexpected hint of spice in a delicate custard.
careful, Martinez. That sharp tongue of yours might contaminate the sauce.
Better than letting it go bland from neglect.
Across the kitchen, Zara dropped a pot with a spectacular clang that echoed like a ceremonial gong. Marcus straightened, chef's instincts snapping him back into instructor mode.
Miss Patel, if you could manage to keep at least some of your mise en place off the floor, the Institute's budget might survive until graduation.
Sorry, chef.
Zara called back, looking anything but apologetic.
Gravity seems particularly aggressive today. Totally unprovoked attack.
Sofia released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hand flexed around her knife handle, knuckles white against the dark wood.
Absolutely not.
Marcus's voice cracked across the kitchen like a whip on stone. He strode over to a terrified-looking student who'd been about to add cream to a nearly broken sauce.
Unless you're trying to create an entirely new category of culinary disaster, perhaps curdled catastrophe française?
The student, James, Sofia thought his name was, stammered something about fixing the texture.
The sauce is beyond saving.
Marcus declared, his accent crisping further with displeasure.
Start again. And this time remember that cooking is chemistry, not chance. Temperature, timing, technique, they aren't suggestions. They're requirements for edibility.
Sofia bit her lip to keep from intervening. James's sauce could have been saved with a careful emulsion and proper temperature control. A little lecithin would stabilize it instantly. But this wasn't her kitchen, and these weren't her students. Zara seized the opportunity to sidle back to Sofia's station, abandoning her own pile of somewhat mangled vegetables.
I saw that, by the way.
She whispered, pretending to borrow a spare towel.
The whole, we hate each other, but also can't stop mentally undressing each other's thing you two have going on.
I wasn't mentally undressing anyone.
Sofia protested, slicing through an onion with unnecessarily precise aggression.
I was defending my brunoise.
Very professional, very culinary. Not at all like the start of every romance novel I definitely don't read during coffee breaks.
Zara tossed the towel over her shoulder with a theatrical flourish.
Though I gotta say, the man dissects everyone else's technique like they've committed crimes against humanity, but with you, he's practically whispering sweet nothings about asymmetrical brunoise.
The man called my signature dish a tragedy in foam form.
Sofia reminded her, voice dropping to ensure it wouldn't carry.
And yet you noticed his cologne,
Zara pointed out, eyebrows performing an elaborate dance.
which, by the way, is Penhaligon's sartorial, €600 a bottle. I may have Googled it after our first class because it smells like money and daddy issues.
I did not.
Sofia started, then caught herself.
We're here to cook, not whatever you're implying.
Sure.
Zara grinned, teeth gleaming against her dark skin.
Just like that sauce is supposed to be simmering, not boiling like the sexual tension between you two?
Sofia swore and rushed back to her station, where her demi-glace was indeed threatening to reduce past the point of perfection. Marcus was there immediately, one eyebrow raised in that insufferable way of his.
Distracted, Chef Martinez?
Not at all, Chef Blackwood.
She adjusted the heat with a steady hand.
Just giving the sauce some freedom to express itself.
Ah, yes, because that worked so well with your notorious paella reimagined, the one that looked like abstract expressionism and tasted like culinary anarchy.
It won Best Innovation at Madrid's Food Festival.
It disrespected centuries of tradition.
It sold out every night.
It was...
He stopped, nostrils flaring slightly as he inhaled. Despite herself, Sofia felt a spark of triumph ignite in her chest. The sauce was perfect, rich, complex, with a depth that could only come from respecting classical techniques. Marcus cleared his throat.
Your temperature control has improved since your reviewing days at least.
And your criticism has gotten more creative. Planning to write another hit piece, or just practicing your adjectives?
Something flickered in his eyes. Frustration? Amusement? Before she could analyze it, he turned to address the class about proper sauce consistency. Sofia focused on straining her demi-glace, steadfastly ignoring how his rolled-up sleeves revealed forearms corded with muscle, or how his voice seemed to deepen when he was explaining classical techniques with that irritating passion of his.
Not staring, huh?
Zara whispered as she passed. Sofia flicked herbs at her with practiced accuracy. But later, as she was packing up her knives, she caught herself watching Marcus demonstrate proper copper pot cleaning technique to a freshman. His hands moved with the kind of assured grace that only came from decades of dedication to craft. It was purely professional appreciation, she told herself. Nothing more. Even if she did catch him watching her filleting demonstration with the same intensity with which she'd once finalized her Michelin-worthy plating. Chapter 5. Empty Calories. The locker room smelled of sweat and bruised egos. Sofia hung her chef's whites carefully, smoothing invisible wrinkles with practiced precision. The cotton fabric had once been a second skin, an identity rather than merely a uniform. Now it felt like borrowed clothing, a costume for a role she was understudying.
You held your own today.
Mee said, leaning against the lockers with casual grace that belied her age.
Not many people can go toe-to-toe with Marcus in his own kitchen. He tends to dye self-confidence like mirepoix.
Sofia's smile didn't reach her eyes.
I've had practice defending my cooking,
Her fingers traced the embroidered SM on her knife roll.
though usually with critics who actually published their names.
His review was anonymous?
Zara looked up from wrestling with her shoelaces, which had somehow become knotted in a configuration that would challenge a sailor.
Seriously? That's like slicing someone while wearing a blindfold.
A concerned traditionalist.
Sofia quoted, the words acidic on her tongue.
I didn't know it was him until I saw his reaction to my name this morning. Hard to forget that particular shade of disdain. Like someone had served him pre-grated parmesan.
May shook her head, silver cropped hair catching the fluorescent light.
Marcus is complicated, brilliant, but wounded. Like someone took his recipe book and rewrote all the measurements in emotions.
Speaking of measurements,
Zara bounced up, somehow having gotten more flour in her hair since class ended, a talent Sofia couldn't fathom.
I believe someone promised drinks, and after watching Chef Complicated spend 20 minutes critiquing your perfect sauce, I'd say you need at least 3, possibly with tequila upgrades.
I didn't actually promise it.
La Villa?
May suggested.
Good wine, better toppers, no chance of running into any faculty.
Except you?
Sofia raised an eyebrow.
I'm not faculty of the 7. I'm just a woman with excellent taste in cover and questionable taste in company.
May grabbed her bag.
But sadly, I have curriculum reviews tonight. You two go plot revolution, or at least some creative health code violations.
Come on.
Zara linked her arm through Sofia's with the unearned familiarity of the genuinely friendly.
You can tell me all about what Mr. Traditional's face did when you corrected his knife grip demonstration. I swear he almost smiled, which would violate at least 3 institute policies.
La Villa was exactly the kind of place Sofia would have dismissed 3 years ago. Traditional tapas, no molecular innovations, not a foam or sphere in sight. Now, watching the elderly owner plate Jamin with the same reverence she'd once given her deconstructed paellas, she felt something twist in her chest like copper wire wrapped too tight.
I always thought I'd have my own place by 35.
Zara said, dissecting a croqueta with surgical precision that hadn't been evident in her knife skills.
Corner cafe? Maybe a little pastry counter. Then I blinked and I was coding apps for startups, watching cooking shows on my lunch break like some kind of culinary voyeur.
What made you quit?
Sofia found herself genuinely curious about this human hurricane with purple hair.
Panic attack in a meeting about optimizing user engagement metrics.
Zara grinned, the expression transforming her face into something incandescent.
Walked out, enrolled here the next day. My parents think I'm having a breakdown. Maybe I am.
She raised her glass.
Your turn. What really happened with the restaurant? And the fiancé? They seem interconnected, like egg yolks and emulsions.
Sofia took a long drink of wine, allowing the Tempranillo to coat her tongue before answering.
Ricardo was my sous chef before he was my fiancé. We built innovation together, or I thought we did. Turns out he was building something else with Anna, our hostess.
Her laugh held no humor.
The health inspector who showed up the day after Blackwood's review. Old friend of Anna's family.
That's
Zara's eyes widened.
incredibly illegal? Like, actual criminal conspiracy illegal?
Incredibly unprovable, especially after Ricardo's family's lawyers got involved.
Sophia signaled for another wine.
By the time the dust settled, I had a choice. Fight a losing legal battle or walk away with enough to pay off some debts. Not all of them, but some.
Her phone buzzed against the wooden table. Another dating app notification. Another handsome stranger with carefully curated photos. This one was a visiting businessman. American. His profile mentioned an appreciation for fine dining and aged whiskey, as if that were a personality.
Don't.
Zara said softly.
Don't what?
That look. I know that look. That's the, maybe this meaningless hookup will fill the void look. I perfected it in coding boot camp. It's like thinking another shot of tequila will fix the 3 you already regret.
Sophia swiped right anyway. The motion as automatic as her knife cuts.
You know,
Zara said, signaling for another round.
for someone who claims to hate Marcus Blackwood's opinions so much, you spent an awful lot of time watching his hands during that filleting demonstration. Like, detailed scientific observation levels of watching.
Sophia nearly choked on her wine.
I was studying his technique.
His technique, of course.
Zara's grin was positively feline.
Just like he was studying proper Brunoise form when he spent 5 minutes hovering behind you? I thought he was going to brush your hair aside and whisper sweet nothings about knife angles.
He was looking for flaws.
Oh, he was looking for something.
Sophia threw a piece of bread at her.
You're experiencing culinary hallucinations. The man literally called my cooking an affront to Spanish culinary heritage.
And yet,
Zara popped an olive in her mouth, savoring it with exaggerated pleasure.
did you see his face when you corrected that sauce? Before he covered it with his usual scowl? That wasn't just professional respect. That was, I'm imagining you correcting other things in private face.
That was indigestion.
Sophia's phone buzzed. The American had matched. She ignored it, suddenly finding the notification irritating rather than validating.
Besides, you heard May. He's got his own damaged chef backstory. Something about a restaurant partnership?
Ooh, yes.
Zara sat up straighter, nearly knocking over her wine glass in her enthusiasm.
I asked around during lunch break. Apparently, he and his business partner had this super successful restaurant in London. Very traditional, lots of stars and awards. Then the partner wanted to modernize the menu.
Let me guess. Marcus had a meltdown about tradition?
Actually, word is he was starting to come around to some changes. But then the partner went behind his back, changed everything without consulting him, and tried to force him out. It got ugly. Legal battles, press wars, the whole soufflé collapse.
Zara lowered her voice conspiratorially.
That's why he's so obsessed with proper technique now. Control thing, probably. If every dice is exact, nothing can surprise him.
Sophia stared into her wine glass, remembering Ricardo's face the day he announced his new vision for innovation.
Betrayal does tend to make you rigid. You build protective shells like tempered chocolate.
So really,
Zara continued, undeterred.
you two have more in common than you think. Both betrayed by partners, both a bit broken, both really hot when you're angry.
We are not having this conversation.
Sophia checked her phone again. The American was suggesting drinks at his hotel bar. The Four Seasons, naturally.
No, you're right.
Zara stole Sophia's phone with surprising dexterity and held it out of reach.
We're having the conversation about why you'd rather hook up with random app guys than admit you felt something in that kitchen today.
I felt irritation. And give me my phone.
Irritation doesn't make your pupils dilate like that.
It's dark in here.
It's actually quite well lit.
Zara glanced at the phone screen.
Daniel, 41, visiting from Chicago? Really? That's what you want instead of exploring whatever that tension was with tall, dark, and traditional?
Sophia snatched her phone back.
What I want is to get through this program, rebuild my reputation, and open a new restaurant. What I don't want is to complicate that with whatever you're imagining.
Fine.
Zara raised her hands in surrender.
Go meet Daniel, probably Dave from Chicago. But when you're lying there afterward feeling empty again, remember this conversation.
Sophia stood, gathering her bag.
I don't feel empty after.
You dice onions at 3 a.m.
That stopped her short.
Just
Zara's voice softened, the teasing tone falling away like a removed chef's jacket.
Maybe the reason none of these hookups fill the void is because they're not what you're hungry for.
Sophia's phone buzzed again. Daniel was waiting.
Get home safe.
She told Zara, ignoring the knowing look in her friend's eyes. The American, David, Daniel, had a hotel room with a view of the cathedral. Sophia didn't look at it. Didn't look at much except the ceiling, really, as his technically proficient hands and practiced mouth went through their expected motions. He knew what he was doing. They all knew what they were doing. That was the problem. After, she declined his offer to stay, to order room service, to do dinner tomorrow maybe. She took a cab home, stood under her shower until the hot water ran cold, then pulled out her knife roll. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Tap, tap, tap. The onions, at least, never disappointed.